Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast, a real look at single parenting, how to navigate the ups and downs of life with kids on your own while keeping sane. We cover all manner of subjects from domestic violence, dealing with childhood trauma, through to fussy eaters and how to help your kids become resilient. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome. This week's guest, Laura Reardon, teaches parents about how to respond to their kids' big emotions and challenging behaviour in a way that creates more peace rather than more conflict in their home. She was graced with 2 children, a boy and a girl, and although she is not a single parent, in their growing up years, she felt frustrated, worried and unsure how to respond to their big emotions and challenging behaviour. One would lash out while the other would shut down. Confusing, eh? She tried many things like counting to 3, consequences, rewards, and ignoring unwanted behaviour, but none of it helped. And in the end, she found herself yelling and worrying and feeling lonely in the whole parenting thing. I think we've all been there. I know I definitely been all 3. Motivated to grow into her best self and help her children grow into their best selves, she earned a certificate as a Child Behaviour Specialist from the early years. Motivated to grow into her best self and help her kids grow into their best selves, she earned a certificate as a Child Behaviour Specialist from the early years, completed parent coaching training from Happily Family, and completed emotional coach training from the Gottman Institute, in addition to her degree in psychology from Northeastern University. And based on that training, she created a 3-step plan for how to respond to the big emotions and challenging behaviour in her home in a way that supports her in managing her own emotions and behaviour and supports her kids in managing theirs. You are listening to Strong, Single and Human podcast. Welcome, Laura. Welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you.
Thank you
on the
very
podcast,
much.
Not to have you, as it were.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, thank you. It's been such a long time since we spoke last, but
it's been a long
great.
time.
Eventually, we get to speak.
Yes.
So, look, I've sort of given an intro as to how you got to where you are, right? So how you were like all of us, right? Bringing up your 2 kids and finding that they were having all these big emotions and stuff. And you were like, well, how do I deal with this? Like, it's almost, I sometimes sit there and look at myself and go, dude, just get over it, all right?
Yes.
It's a toy that broke. Like, it was a piece of plastic. It was a McDonald's toy or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, so what are these big emotions that our kids are like, why are they so big?
Yeah, I think that, what is helpful, if it's okay with you, is to start with a definition, or my definition of emotional regulation, because as a parent, when my kids were in their growing up years, my daughter's a freshman in college now, and my son is just graduated from college and living in his first apartment. But in their growing up years, there were big emotions like anger and anxiety, and there were, big behaviors like lashing out and shutting down. And so what I wanted is to, have less conflict and more peace in my home. And I wanted to teach them the skills so that in their future homes and within themselves and within their relationships, they would have the knowledge and skills to create peace for themselves. And so that started me on the path to where I am now. And essentially, what I've learned is how to respond to those big emotions and challenging behaviors in ways that build social and emotional skills. And I think to understand what social and emotional skills are, because that's a term that a lot of us are familiar with and gets tossed around a lot, but I'm not sure, if we all have the same definition or really an understanding of what that means.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you, because you were saying social and emotional, right? So what does that actually
What the heck
mean?
does that mean? Yeah.
Yeah. And also, and I think you hit on a really key point, right? It's about being able to control, as parents, being able to control our emotions, but show our children how they can actually, and I think control is maybe is the wrong word, right? Because it means that we're like my interpretation of control, maybe it's just my hang-ups, is control and push down, right? It's not about pushing down or hiding or anything like that, but it's about managing, is maybe the right word, your emotions, so that your children can manage their emotions, not when they're little, but then when they get older and you're not there.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think it's helpful to start with an understanding of what is the purpose of emotions. And the purpose of emotions is to communicate information to us about our met and our unmet needs. So when we're feeling comfortable emotions, our needs are being met. And when we're feeling uncomfortable emotions, our needs are not being met. And so sometimes they're comfortable, sometimes they're not, but all emotions are really important and safe to feel because they communicate information to us, and they're intended to be transient, to come to us, deliver a message, and then move on. And so if we try to ignore those emotions, they're just going to get louder in their attempt to communicate what they're trying to communicate to us. So that's the purpose of emotions. And the purpose of logic is to become curious about what our emotions are communicating to us and to respond in effective ways, meaning ways that create peace and connection within ourselves and within our relationships with others. And so in an ideal world, it all works very beautifully. We're feeling our feelings. We're becoming curious. We're responding in effective ways. And doesn't that sound fabulous?
Oh my God. I wish it was that simple.
Exactly. And so the question is, why is it so challenging? And so I think it's really helpful to create some compassion and understanding for why that is so challenging, not just for our kids, but for ourselves as parents, of course. And so it starts with an understanding of our nervous system and how it unconsciously affects our behavior. And our nervous system, essentially, in short, is our brain and our body and the communication between the two, and impacts everything that we do. And so when our nervous system perceives safety, we are regulated, emotionally regulated, meaning that we're calm, we're open to listening and learning and problem solving, and we're able to act as our best selves when we perceive safety. But when our nervous system perceives a threat, we become dysregulated, which triggers our fight, flight, or freeze response, and we lash out or we shut down to protect ourselves. And so
now, is that because, and sorry to interrupt you, but is that because it's our reptilian brain as such, although we've evolved so far, it's our reptilian brain going, the emotions that we're getting are, I don't feel comfortable with this, I feel at risk, therefore we shut down to learning perception. All we can perceive is, am I going to die, or am I at risk or not? And that's where our brains, that's why everything else shuts down, because we're just thinking about survival then. Am I right with that?
That's exactly right. And for our ancestors, more often their fight, flight, or freeze response got activated by physical threats. But in today's day and age, more often we get triggered by our big emotions. So when we feel big emotions, it triggers that same fight, flight, or freeze response that kept our ancestors alive. And so our brain is not capable of differentiating a perceived threat from a real threat. And so to your point, yes, when we experience big emotions, it can feel as if that's a life or death situation. And yes, our logical brain shuts down and we don't have access to respond in effective ways, because it's all priority on survival. It's all priority on instincts. It's not a time to, let's consider the most effective way to respond. It's a time to act without thinking, literally. And so we do.
And also, and also you don't actually sit there and go, oh, why am I feeling like it takes a lot of effort to go, hang on a minute, take a deep breath. And I suppose in a way that's why we say, if you're feeling stressed, take a deep breath, because does that then connect you back into why am I feeling like that? And it sort of stops the reptilian brain. Sorry, and maybe I'm getting a bit further forward than
you're exactly on target, because that's just it. It's automatic and it's unconscious. So it happens very quickly. And so, for example, when our toddler, when we're at a store and we say no to that thing that our toddler wants and they expected to hear yes, or when our preschooler has a new baby arrive in the family, or our older kid, it's time to shut off their video game and start their homework, or for us as parents, when our kids are yelling, screaming, hitting, being disrespectful or defiant, all of these experiences create these really big emotions. And so, again, it's that automatic and unconscious. If we're not tuning in with our awareness and utilizing strategies to respond in different, more effective ways, to your point, taking a breath or what have you, then yes, we're going to go on instinct, and we're going to respond in these ways of lashing out or shutting down. For our kids, that might look like yelling, screaming, hitting, all of these behaviors, big behaviors that we see in our kids, or it could look like running away. That's the flight, or it could look like freeze. Yeah. It could look like just shutting down and kind of going inwards. Shutting down. And for us as parents, when we're in that fight response, that can look like yelling, blaming, shaming, punishing, or even shutting down as well. Or right? Shutting down, yes. It can be shutting down physically or emotionally. Exactly.
Because if you go, I don't know how to handle this. Like if your child hits you and you go, well, I don't know how to handle this because I don't hit my child and I don't want to yell at my child, but I don't know what to do. Sometimes you just shut down because you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So it's about, at that point you shut down and withdraw and go, okay, I'm leaving this situation because it might be better. Yeah.
And what's interesting about that point, and I was actually just having a really reflective and important conversation with my 21-year-old son this morning, who happens to be home visiting. And we were reflecting on something you make me think of as you're talking. And that's that in our, in their growing up years, I would respond by shutting down emotionally, but you wouldn't know it. I thought I was doing all the right things. I was calm. I was not a yeller. And I would respond with logic. How do we fix this? How do we give you the tools to, respond more effectively? How do we communicate more effectively? I would go straight to problem solving. And my husband came from more of a family where, they solve things by yelling. And so, but either way, in both, many of us, I can't say, I happen to, I think being more, I think it's more common to lash out and have that response. But the most interesting part about that is that both are equally ineffective. And this is why, because what happens is in both cases, we are not able to, we are not able to be we are not able to allow for the emotion. We are trying to, if we're yelling, we're saying, I can't handle your big emotions. I don't think you can handle your big emotions. And that is the same message that we're giving if we are going straight to logic, because again, we're skipping allowing for our child to experience uncomfortable feelings together with enough support, because when we do that, we create tolerance for these uncomfortable feelings so that they learn to be with them instead of needing to lash out and shut down. And it's when we lash out or shut down that we essentially reinforce the message that uncomfortable emotions are bad and scary and a threat. And yeah, we're absolutely right to initiate that fight, flight, or freeze response. And so,
and I think that's key.
Yeah.
I think it's key because I also, when I sit there and I think back, and my son does say, because I said to him this year, how can I be a better mum, right? I want to be the best mum I can be to you. And shame. And he did say, first of all, Mummy, you're great. You don't need to be any better, which I was like, right answer, here's the $20. But then also, then I said, no. I said, there must be things that Mummy does. Let's sit and think about it that you want Mummy to change. And the one thing he said was, can you not yell so much? So I'm like, okay, right. Okay. And I know I do, but when I think about it, to have as an adult, somebody either withdraw from you or yell at you, it's pretty scary. If you're in a relationship with somebody who's a yeller, right, as an adult, it's pretty scary. So as a child, it must be 3, 4, 5, 10-fold, because that's your parent that you're relying on, that is your world, that then is loving most of the time, but then, 20% of the time does the yelling or does the withdrawing. That must be pretty scary. It must create anxiety within that child that as a parent you don't really want.
Right. And what's interesting is that depending on the temperament of the child, they could respond with a fight response. And so you're just escalating the storm, and then, you're yelling, they're yelling louder. And, or you could have a child that responds with actually a response that we haven't talked about, which is a fawn response. And that's another response, in which you, respond in a way that you try to appease the person that is, creating fear for you. And so oftentimes that goes really missed by us because we see a really cooperative kid and we have no idea that we would never think that they're actually in a fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn, in this case, response. And so, for those of us who do yell and then we get this really cooperative response, we might have no idea that that's happening, and that makes sense that we don't know it. But I think it's twofold. I mean, I'd be happy to share a technique that I created, a tool that I created, an in the moment tool for, how to support us in staying regulated. But then I think it's really important to talk about that. That's not very realistic. And I'm hoping it's going to be helpful. I know I use it, but because we're human, we're going to get it wrong a lot of the time. And so there's actually really valuable, things that we can do in those moments that we get it wrong that create safety in our relationship and that teach our kids really important skills. So, but just to start with the tool, it's called the ABCs for keeping calm. And A is for awareness, as we've as we've referred to. That's the really important starting point. Because when we don't have awareness, we're going to go with that automatic reaction without thinking or being aware. And so it's a matter of starting to become more in tune with your thoughts, feelings, and body sensations as clues to when you're feeling big emotions, to when you're feeling triggered, reactive. And so for a lot of us, we are not in the habit of that. We're in the habit of being very busy and go, go, go.
Well, that was what I was going to ask. I was going to say, how do you become aware? Are there any techniques that you can use? Like, I know, and you're right, we just, like, before Christmas for me was very busy. I was working, I was busy trying to get everything sorted for Christmas. We were going away, there was lots of things that were going on, right? So I was having lots of stressy emotions in the fact that I had lots of things on my list I needed to do for work, for home, for going away, for Christmas. They were all my big emotions, but I necessarily wasn't quite aware of them all and what the impact of them was having on my son, because I was just getting on with it. So how do you stop and become aware of what's going on in your life?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest way for parents who are so busy, and single parents who are even busier, is to incorporate it into our day in moments where there is just the opportunity to do that. So, for example, if we're working at the computer and we all take those moments where we need to look up and maybe look at something different other than the computer screen, just take a quick mental break. Oftentimes we'll go to our phone, of course, or check our email, but an alternative is to take those moments and to check in with yourself, check in with your thoughts, your feelings, and your body sensations. And what's interesting to know about your body sensations is that is actually your first clue towards your emotions, because we feel our feelings in our body as body sensations before they travel to our brain, where we can identify words to label them as feelings. So that's for some of us, we are able to become aware of those sensations. And for some people, that's really a challenge. And so that's okay. If you are able to tune in with those sensations and become aware of it, when I'm feeling angry, where do I feel it? Do I feel it in my chest, in my throat, in my head, in my stomach? Where am I feeling it when I start to feel angry, or where am I feeling it in my body when I start to feel anxious? But we can also there are other ways to clue into that, including our thoughts and considering how we're feeling in that moment. So just taking those micro minutes throughout the day. It could be when we're in the car waiting for our kid to come out. It could be in that moment when we wake up and we, have a moment before we jump out of bed. We can create our own opportunities as they work for our schedule. And, for some people, they'll be even structured about it and set their phone to give them reminders at certain points throughout the day. So again, it's just, we can certainly take on a practice of mindfulness and mindful meditation for those who want to take it deeper. But at the most practical level, these are ways that even very busy people who don't have that extra moment in the day can practicing becoming more aware.
Yeah, it might, like for me, if I've got and I work 8 hours a day. So like I might get up and go make a cup of tea, and I work from home at the moment. So I might get up, make a cup of tea, coffee, whatever, go and sit on my step at my back door, and just sit in the sun, because I'm in Australia. We're all in Australia. And sit on the back step on my door if it's not raining. And most of the time it's not raining. And just sit and just drink my coffee. And it might take 5-10 minutes to drink my coffee, and just do nothing. No phone, no nothing. Just look at the bees buzzing around and like the sky and the clouds, and just
Beautiful.
think, oh, I've got to cut that grass, and things like that to come in. But it's just a time to relax, I think unwind as such. And you can't do that with the kids around all the time and working, etc., etc. So yeah, it's just giving yourself a little bit of time, isn't it?
Yeah, and you raised a really good point, because there are other ways to practice awareness and mindfulness as well. And it doesn't just have to be, of course, tuning in with your inner world. It can be tuning in with your outer world. And that's what you're doing when you're sitting there on the steps. And that's a great way to practice mindfulness. We can also create those moments with our children. We can just create those moments where we just really pay attention to what's happening in the moment. And that could be a walk. That could be sitting on the grass. That could be anywhere, anytime, but just inviting our child into that experience is a beautiful way to experience it ourselves and introduce that, that concept to our children as well.
Yeah. No, I agree. But it doesn't even need to be like sitting on a step drinking a coffee. Like you said, it could be, I'm just going to do a 30-second stretch or whatever. It just doesn't need to, or I'm going to get up and walk around the block. Like, my block's not very big, but I'm going to get up, walk into the garden and walk back into the house again. Or I'm going to get up and walk around work, or, just to break that sitting there working, or, in the house with the children or whatever. I do laugh and sometimes say it might be just that break of going to the toilet, sitting there and eat, or the bathroom, sitting there and eating a chocolate bar, apple, whatever. I'm trying to eat apples, not chocolate bars at the moment. But So that's just becoming aware.
Yes, because without awareness, we don't have a choice. But with awareness, we can create that pause before that automatic and unconscious reaction. And so then B is for breathe. Once we become aware and create that moment, we can take that deep breath in, letting our exhale be longer than our inhale. Sometimes it's one breath, sometimes it's 10 breaths, sometimes it's 20 minutes. We don't always have that opportunity, but we do what makes sense in the moment, of course. And for those that breathing isn't what works for them, consider B as symbolic for what does. Essentially, what we're looking to accomplish is to breathe, or whatever supports you in being with your emotions as they rise up within you, and as they recede, and just really being with them without lashing out or shutting down. And so once we have the awareness, that's what we want to do. We want to identify that coping tool that helps us be with our emotions without lashing out or shutting down. And so if breathing isn't your thing, other ideas include, for some people, it's movement. Doing a quick yoga pose, getting up and just simply walking around, even jumping in place. Or for some, it's, pressure points, like feeling pressure can be calming. So feeling your feet, really pressing your feet into the floor and feeling that pressure, or pressing your hands against a wall. For others, it can be taking a sip of water, or humming, a little bit of humming. It's very personalized, and it's about experimenting. Maybe you're someone that knows what calms them, and maybe you're someone that can consider becoming curious about what calms you and experimenting in the moment, when you're feeling big emotions, what helps you tolerate them.
But that's the key thing, right? B is about doing what calms you down. That's the key thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's what helps you cope with that emotion, what helps you be with that emotion. It's not about making the emotion go away, because we know that's not the goal. The goal is to be with the emotion without lashing out or shutting down.
And I have to say, over the last few years, there are times where I feel like I need to take action, but I don't, because I go, okay, I'm going to sit with this for the next 24 hours. So it might be that I'm feeling anxious, or it might be that I'm unsure about a move and my next move or whatever. I don't know. But that I sit there and I go, right, I'm just going to do nothing for the next 24 hours and then see how I feel and assess why I was anxious or what was going on with me over these next 24 hours. So I'm not going to do anything. And God love him. I lost a friend 9 years ago to male suicide. And this leave it 24 hours thing that I do was what he used to say to me. He used to go, don't do anything. Maybe you should do nothing for the next 24 hours. And the one thing that's so annoying is if he'd have done nothing for 24 hours, would he still be here? Do you know what I mean? It's frustrating, but it comes from him. So, it's every time I just go, right, okay, what would Tim do? He would just leave it for 24 hours. So I just leave it for 24 hours. And it's really helped me in the last few years, being a single mum, dealing with things. Just take a breath, which is the B thing, right? Take a breath, step back, leave it for 24 hours. Don't do anything. It's still going to be there, or maybe it won't be, but, nothing's going to drastically happen. So, okay.
Yeah, and let me just comment that that's a beautiful example of being with your emotions as they rise up and recede, and allowing them to pass through you, and then becoming curious and reflecting on what's going on here. What do I need in this moment? And so that's really a beautiful example of that.
Yeah, and it's just saying 24 hours. Then if you still want to do what you were going to do, go ahead and do it. But, just sit with it, and then you might change. So, yeah, a little bit frustrating that it came from him and he didn't follow his own bloody advice. But anyway, that was where his journey needed to finish, and he needed to go on and do some other things. So it's okay. So that was B.
Yes. So C is calm your thoughts. So we can tune in once we've, become aware and paused and taken that breath. We once we have moved to a place where we are able to re-engage our logic, because as we mentioned, that logical part of our brain becomes really hard to access when we're in that fight, flight, or freeze response. But once we've calmed our body enough that we can reopen access to that logical part of our brain, we can tune in with our thoughts and consider what are our thoughts. This is our tendency to have negative thoughts also comes from our ancestors and how they evolved to protect themselves. So, for example, if they saw a stick, they might assume it was a snake, or if they, saw a beige rock in the distance, they might assume it was a tiger, because making quick judgments that assumed the worst kept them alive. And so we evolved to make quick judgments that assume the worst. And so we can check in with those thoughts. Are we having catastrophizing thoughts and assuming the worst case scenario will happen? We can acknowledge that and accept it with compassion and say, yeah, it makes sense that I'm having that thought, and not the goal of making that thought go away any more than it's our goal to make our emotions go away. But we can also consider a more calming thought. Everything might be okay. Or if we're having, self-critical thoughts, I'm a terrible parent. I cannot even believe it. I just yelled and I am the worst. What's wrong with me? We can then consider a more compassionate thought. Being a parent, being a single parent, I will add to this audience, is really hard. And it makes sense that I yell sometimes. I'm human. I can't get it right. This was a hard moment. This was a hard day. This is a hard life. And
hence the title of this podcast. It's about being strong, single, but we're all human, right? So we've got to accept and embrace that we're human. There are these emotions and reactions that we have that were there to save us and help us survive, like thousands and thousands of years ago. But societies and our environments have moved on, but our emotions haven't. We're still the creatures we were as such.
I know.
Well, maybe we have in some areas.
Well, in some ways,
that's a whole different story.
So, it is really crazy that we're still operating with the same brain in many ways and in such different life circumstances. So it's everything I teach is the foundation is compassion, understanding why it's so hard to respond to our emotions in effective ways, both for ourselves as parents and for our kids, is really the root of everything I teach. And, to that point, if our thought is a judgmental thought about our kid, like, oh my gosh, my kid is so spoiled. They can't handle hearing no for one thing. I mean, I just bought and we can consider, hearing no is really hard, and it makes sense that they're feeling really upset, so it's just, again, we can tune in with our thoughts and accept them with compassion and also consider a calming thought.
How do we help our kids to do that? Because that's the ABCs are great. And I love that you named them ABC because it's brilliant. So, and that's great for us. How do we help our children? Like my son's 7 and we're week 2 of going back to school, and it's horrendous at the moment because we've obviously had the holidays. He's been with family. He's been with me. So we've had all that dynamic. And now we've gone back to school dynamic, right? Which is with his mates. We've then gone into I know best and I want to do this, and I don't want you to tell me I can't do this. And so all of this negotiation and no, I want to do what I want to do sort of thing at 7. But anyway, so how do we help him and other children deal with being told no, how do we help them?
Yeah.
How did you help your kids? Your kids sound really grounded and off to uni and having conversations with you about emotions and stuff. It's awesome.
No. Yeah. So I created a tool, an in the moment tool for our kids as well. And so as we know, when our kids are at their worst, it's when they need us the most. And so I created a tool called the VIP tool, which is sort of ironic because, of course, sometimes we might be thinking about, got to be kidding. The last thing I want to give my kid is the VIP treatment when they're acting like this. But when we consider it from the point of view of, in terms of just helping us remember it, it's really actually when they're at their worst is when they're struggling the most and when they need us the most. But what that stands for is, we'll start with the V, and that stands for, and this is the most important part, is, validating the emotions underneath the behavior while, of course, setting limits on behavior. And so what that means is, from a theoretical point of view, and then we can get into, how that would look in real life, but it means responding with an attitude of, you're not a bad kid. You're a kid who's experiencing strong emotions and unmet needs, and you do not yet have the brain development or life skills to respond in more effective ways. And I'm here to help you as you learn and grow. And so what that can look like in real life is, let's say, let's take an example of, a brother hitting a sister. The first thing we'd want to do, of course, safety first. I won't let you hit. I won't let you hit. And then we can get to those emotions under the behavior. I see how angry you are. And that makes sense. You know what? I'd feel so angry if someone just grabs something from me. I get it. That makes sense. And again, we're responding in a way where they feel seen and they feel understood. They're not a bad kid. They're a good kid who doesn't have the capacity in that moment to respond to their big emotions in a more effective way. They're going with that automatic and unconscious reaction to lash out or shut down in response to the big emotions that in that example that they felt when somebody grabbed something from them. And so when we can view behavior through this lens of our nervous system, it's a very different way of looking at it, and it can create that compassion and understanding for why responding in that way, first of all, is going to create calm. Because when we feel seen and understood, let's use ourselves as an example. Let's say that we were with somebody who we are close with, and we were, acting in a really horrible way. We were just kind of acting as our worst selves. And it would make a lot of sense for that person to react in a way where they maybe felt angry with us, or kind of were looking at us like, oh my gosh, you're a horrible person, right? I mean, that would be really understandable. Yeah. And yet, imagine if they had the capacity to see through our behavior into our inner world and recognize we're a good person who's had a really tough day. And in this moment, we are acting as our worst selves. And so instead responded with, oh boy, I'm guessing you had a tough day. What can I do to help? Can you imagine how it would feel to feel seen and understood, and how that would create that immediate feel of calm and safety? We would feel emotionally safe with that person. And what that does when we create that safety is we support a return to regulation. And when we support a return to regulation, we support a return to a state in which our kid has the capacity, the biological capacity, to act as their best selves, to listen, to cooperate, to learn, to problem solve. And so it can be a really counterintuitive way in terms of how our culture teaches us to respond to behavior. But if we have the understanding of the biological reactions, it makes actually a lot of sense.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. So,
and then
sorry. No. So what you're doing is, if your child is having a big emotion, you're not having a big emotion yourself, basically. So you're just recognizing that your child is having the big emotion and confirming with your child that you recognize that they're having a big emotion. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and if it's just a big emotion, I mean, because you bring up a great point, because sometimes it's about big behaviors. And that's when we want to look for the emotion driving the big behavior, look for the unmet need. Yeah, and that's step 2. That's I, for identify what's the unmet need. What's the unmet need under this emotion? Because we know our emotions communicate information to us about our needs. And so it could be as simple as, oh my gosh, my kid hasn't eaten since, or they're overtired. And, it could be something as simple as that. It could be they need to learn a more effective way to get their needs met. So for example, once you help your child return to regulation by, seeing and, helping them feel seen and understood, and returning them to a calm state where they're going to be open to reason, open to calm and cooperation, then you can, move to identifying needs and solving problems. But, one of the needs might be, to your point, just to get some big pent-up emotions out. And so it could be that those emotions come out once we've helped them feel safe enough to stop acting out, or it could be that it just starts as emotions. But either way, the most effective thing that we can do when it's just emotions, not behavior, just big emotions, the most effective thing that we can do is just create space and allow for our child to experience these really uncomfortable emotions together with enough support. And when we do that, they will build emotional strength. It's when we lash out or shut down. It's when we yell or when we, shut down emotionally. It's when we can't go there. It's when we are not able to be with the emotions in the moment that we create emotional fragility, and that we fuel that, fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And so it's when we can give our children experiences of being with those uncomfortable emotions together with enough support that they're going to build that tolerance and become less reactive to them over time.
So how I stop myself and give my child space is that I actually say internally, he's not going to listen to me until he calms down, right? Because you're right, they shut down, and it doesn't matter whether you say something and they look as though they're listening or they say they're listening, right? They ain't listening, right?
Their logical brain is shut down. Literally, it's hard to access.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so how do we give them space to, like, he now goes in his bedroom and shuts his door. So I go, okay, come and speak to me when you need to speak to me, right? And and I let him calm down that way. And then we go in and have a conversation about what just happened or whatever. But are there any other ways? I mean, I don't even know if that's the right way to do it, right? But how do we allow them that calm down time? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you bring up such an important point, because validating their emotions in a way that creates a felt sense of safety in their body and helps them return to regulation is highly individual. And that's going to look different for every child. And so it's a matter of, like, when we are learning what calms us with that B step, it's experimenting, your kid best, what's going to help calm your kid. And also it depends on the level of reactivity. So for example, for some kids, it's words that will be calming. Those words of, oh, I see how angry you are. That makes sense. You know what? I would feel so angry too. And so for some kids, it's the words. For some kids, words are highly agitating. And so it could be not communicating that message of, I see you, you're a good kid, you're feeling big emotions, and you don't have the skills or capacity or brain development to manage them more effectively in this moment. That can be communicated through a look in your eye, a touch on the shoulder, and it could be through movement. It could be, you know what, let's go take a walk. It could be calming scents or calming sounds. And it could be time alone, especially as kids get older. And so we never want to, and this gets to the idea, and I know this is not at all what you're talking about, but it makes me think about timeouts. And so for some of us, especially with younger kids, we think of, if our kid is out of control, that we would send them to a timeout. But what's interesting to understand is that as mammals, when we are in times of distress, we seek comfort from, when you're a child, from a caregiver. For us as adults, we want to be close to that adult we feel safe with. When we're in times of distress, I think we can all know what that feels like, and so it creates safety for us to be with somebody we feel safe with in times of distress. And so if we send somebody away, if we send our kid to a timeout when they're acting in really challenging ways or having big emotions because we want them to calm down, what it actually does is it heightens their threat response, because it's going to create fear to be away from their safe person. at a time of distress. So instead, we want to keep them close. So for when our kids are younger, we want to keep them close, and we want to say those words, or we want to have those nonverbal looks, or we want to touch, or we want to move, or what have you. But as they express the desire to have some alone time as they get older, we absolutely want to support that. It's whatever helps your kid in whatever age or stage. And again, it depends on the level of reactivity. For some moments, it could be as simple as reconnecting and creating that safety and being able to move on. And other times it's going to be simply surviving the moment in a way that keeps everybody physically and emotionally safe. It could be that kid needs to go in their bedroom and, take 20 minutes, a half an hour, just to be alone. And so we can say, we're here when you need us, or I'm going to check in on you. But we want to, of course, support whatever helps them calm.
I mean, it's different, the different emotions that he goes through. So if it's anger and he's angry at me, well, that's straight in the bedroom, door shut.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay. But then I know when he's ready to talk, because he comes out and goes, can I have a hug? And I'm like, yep, okay. And so we do the hug thing. But for other feelings, it can just be, I need a hug, Mum. And so you just give him, I hope it continues. He is only 7. I'm sure at 16 he isn't going to want a hug. I don't know. He can get one.
He might,
yeah, you never know.
Comfort. Yeah,
exactly. So, but yeah, and it varies with the different emotions that we actually go through. So yeah, that's sort of where we're at.
Very nuanced. Yes.
So, okay. So that's great. So what's the P then?
P is for problem solve. And so, once we identify the need, that can look like simply offering them a snack, can be taking a break. It can be, if they're regulated enough in the moment, we can help them learn more effective ways to get their needs met. Okay, I get it. You don't want someone to grab from you. That makes sense. How can we get that need met in a different way, in a way that doesn't hurt somebody, it's really effective to include our kid in the problem solving, because when we include them in identifying the solution and thinking of new ways, first of all, it creates confidence and competence. They learn how to be problem solvers, but also it increases and creates motivation. When they come up with the solution themselves, they're much more likely to want to implement that solution. But if it's a moment, if our kid has just completely lost it, then we're going to be doing that problem solving later at a calm time when they're regulated. So again, we move into problem solving once they're regulated enough. And sometimes that can be in the moment, once we've given them that, once we've found the way to communicate to them, I see you. I see you're a good kid that's struggling right now. And they've feel seen and understood. And they're moving to regulation, again. So sometimes that's in the moment. Sometimes it's a later time. And it could be that the solution is simply to, as we were talking about, create space for those emotions to come out, and there's no problem to be solved. We just need a moment to feel our feelings, and then we're ready to move on.
Well, and you may not be, they may want to process that. As I suppose as they get older, they may want to deal with it themselves. It's very easy when they're little for us parents to come in and go, right, well, we'll sort this, so sharing toys or whatever. But then when it's things that are happening at school or whatever, they may have an emotion at home, a big emotion, I suppose, but then they feel they want to solve it or whatever. So I suppose then as a parent, and I in a way, I know he's only 7, but I'm sort of thinking more towards like teenagers. In a way, as a parent, we have to stop, don't we? And we have to let them do that, sort their own stuff out.
Yeah, and we can begin to transition into that, even using this tool, because when we get to, going back to the validating of their emotions, what happens is that when we respond over and over and over and over again to their big behaviors by, helping them go from dysregulated to regulated. Their brain is going to wire such that they will be able to self-regulate. And so it's interesting because a lot of times we think to go straight to tools. But what happens, and what's really important to understand, is that we could, for example, teach our child the tool of breathing. But what happens is that until the child develops self-regulation, they do not have the self-control to say, I'm feeling triggered. I could breathe right now.
Right.
And so until they have developed self-regulation, we co-regulate. Co-regulation creates self-regulation. So that's essentially what I'm talking about when we're talking about validating the emotions, because that's something that helps calm them. In whatever way we learn, they're able to hear that message. That's co-regulation. We're helping them calm. And so again, when we respond in that way over and over again, they're going to learn to one day be able to do it themselves. And that's the time when we can, they might be able to start implementing those tools on their own. So it's like we could do it with them as they're learning, but we can't expect them to do it themselves. That was one of the biggest things, the biggest learning curves for myself is, again, I respond with logic to the big emotions and challenging behaviors. So I would just go straight to, okay, so this is a tool and what's a plan for next time? And, and then, oh my gosh, how come you didn't implement that plan next time? And I learned it's because it is, and it's actually, to be honest with you, kind of a painful memory. And I've had this conversation with my daughter. And I do remember one time, I don't remember her age. I mean, she was getting a little older, and I remember saying to her, no, you need to really learn the skills to be able to calm yourself. And I just didn't know better. I just didn't. I didn't know about co-regulation. I didn't know that co-regulation creates self-regulation and that you can't expect a child to self-regulate before they're developmentally ready. And it's not about age. It's highly individualized, depending on genetics and life experiences, temperament. There is no age where you can say, oh, they're 3, they're going to be doing this. They're 7, they're going to be doing that. No, it's highly individualized. And so kids need co-regulation as long as they need co-regulation. And so you can be doing that breathing with them in the moment, or finding out, what calms them. But you can't expect them to be able to execute that on their own until they're developmentally ready to do that.
Well, that's interesting, because that leads on to my next question, really. Is it ever too late to learn this?
No. I am a great example of no. No, it's not too late. I didn't figure this out until the later years. And even if you don't figure it out until the adult, it's, what this is it's all about relationship. And we want to be in relationship in ways that we want to respond to our, all kind of comes back to the original. We want to learn how to respond to our big emotions and unmet needs in ways that create peace within ourselves and within our relationships with others. So even if we are a parent listening that has an adult child, these are things that we can, implement at any age or stage, in terms of, wanting to learn how to regulate our own emotions and to learn to communicate our needs in effective ways, in ways that identify solutions rather than focus on blame. We want to learn to listen with the intent of understanding rather than the intent of figuring out what we can say to prove the other person wrong. And then we want to work collaboratively together to identify solutions that, recognize the feelings and the needs of all involved. So are you going to be implementing the VIP tool with your adult child? No, but these are all, it's all under the umbrella of social and emotional skills. How do we learn to be with our feelings without lashing out or shutting down, and instead learn to respond in more effective ways.
And emotions don't stop, do they? I mean, big emotions, little emotions, any emotions, they don't stop just because you become an adult, as we know. As both you and I know.
Yeah, so, part of our humanity.
Yeah, it's just being able to understand them. It's the ABCs, isn't it, really? As you move into that sort of adulthood, it's like the ABC sort of situation.
Yes. Yeah, that's the adult tool. And that's, when our child is, ready to, is able, developmentally able to regulate, that's why it's the tool for adults and not the tool for the kids, because we can't expect kids to go through that process until they've developed self-regulation and have the control to, implement a tool.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Look, thank you so much for going through and talking to us about the ABCs. I feel like I'm on a kids program now, but talking to us about the ABCs and the VIP method of dealing with these big emotions. Where can people find you if they want to find out more about the ABCs, VIPs, and things like that? Have you got a website? Are you on the socials, as it were?
Yes, people can find me at laurareardoncoaching.com. That's my website where you'll find everything. You'll find links to my social media accounts. You'll find blogs if what you're hearing speaks to you and you're interested in reading a little bit more, going a little deeper on this. I encourage you to look there. And if there's anyone that's interested in one-on-one support, I specialize in helping parents create personalized parenting plans. And what that is a plan for how to respond to the, big behaviors and challenging, the big emotions and challenging behaviors in your home in a way that builds your social and emotional skills, your child's social and emotional skills, and in a way that is customized to, the specific challenges, developmental stages, and temperament of your child. And you get it in writing so you can share it with others as well.
Awesome. Great. Well, look, I have one final question for you. I don't know if it's going to be an easy one or a hard one, but what book would you recommend to my listeners and why?
That's an easy one. I would recommend, it's a fairly new book this year. I guess we're in 2023, so I think it came out in 2022. But
I can't guess you're saying that yet at the moment either. Last year.
So it is called Brain Body Parenting, and it's by Dr. Mona Delahooke. And she goes really deep into the science under, really what she refers to is this revolution in parenting that is in the infancy stage, but it's where we're headed. And she is leading the way. And, she's being asked to speak at major conferences throughout the world, because people are really starting to pay attention to this new lens through which we are looking at behavior. And it's no longer about, consequences and rewards and or ignoring. It's, recognizing the science behind the behavior in more effective ways to respond and, to teach our children the skills that we want for them to have in their adult lives so that they can have those, successful relationships in their adult lives.
Yes, and I'm so glad that we've got all of this information that's out there. Sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming, but I'm glad that people are starting to look at all of this brain, body, and understanding how we need to help our children become the people we want them to become in their adult lives. So, yeah, it's really good. Well, that's definitely going on the list then. That one is definitely going on my list. No, that's cool.
You'll have to let me know what you think. Yeah.
I will. Look, thank you so much for coming and joining us on the podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to you and learning all about these big emotions that we all have and how to deal with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure having a conversation with you. I love your questions and the dialogue that we've had together. So it's really been a pleasure for me.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you would like to hear more, please hit subscribe wherever you like to hear podcasts. If you would like to support us further, share this episode with your friends and family. And finally, drop us a review on iTunes, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas. It all helps me to understand and produce awesome content you want to hear just like this. If you want to check out our past episodes, write to us, appear on the podcast, or for links, resources, and show notes, go to our website, www.strongsingleandhuman.com. We are also on all the usual social media platforms, Insta, Facey, and Twitter. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Be kind to yourself, and remember, no one is perfect. We're all just putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best. I'm Claire Martin, and you've been listening to the Strong, Single, and Human podcast.